Good morning, learners. Today we are going to look at literature. In grade 7, we are going to look at 5 genres: novels, short stories, folklore, dramas, and poems. You should be familiar with most of these concepts as you have been doing some of these in your English lessons since grade 4. We will be looking at all of these genres during the year, but today I would love to start with the components of a short story. So, what is a short story? Let me give you the broad view. Well, it is short. Imagine that. It focuses on only one incident, one happening, one action that takes place, one main event. It has a single plot or a story. It has a single setting or place. A short story has a small number of characters. These characters are usually introduced by using specific details and unique features. Just think of a beautiful princess with golden hair, or an ogre with stinky breath and green skin, or a little boy with satellite dish ears. A short story covers a short period of time. Now it's time to go into more detail. The plot. This is the action that takes place in the story, the main event of the story, but not only that, it is a series of connected happenings with a result. It must be an initial event, conflict that drives the action of the characters. Now let us look at the stages of the plot. First, we will have the introduction of the characters. Then the development of the initial conflict which causes the situation. It starts generating circumstances which create a rising action, which in turn creates heightened anticipation for the reader. Next, we will have the climax. This is the highest point of the anticipation. This is the make or break point. The point where the main character must make his or her life-altering decision. Then finally, it is the falling action and conclusion. This is usually like a summary of the consequences of the choice that the main character has made. Now the next component is the setting. The setting is the background against which the incidents of the story takes place. But the setting is also the overall picture the story creates. Example, think of a movie's opening scene where you see the camera moving in. First, it will focus on the setting as a farm, but the background is the farmhouse or the barn or the fields. Think of the panning of the camera that shows you all these different places on the farm. The setting includes where the story takes place, so it's the place, as well as the time, for example, the year, the month, the time of day. Some stories, from beginning to end, can take place in a second. Think of the final fight scenes in the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn. The whole scene takes place in a few seconds in which Alice shows the leader of the Volturi his immediate future in a blink of an eye. It also includes the social conditions of the story. Example, maybe the story starts off in the World War II, or it starts off in a post-apocalyptic film like Mad Max Fury Road or Divergent or Equilibrium. Then we come to the atmosphere. This includes the tone and the feeling of the story. Example, if the story is cheery or creepy or gloomy. Now, I want to test you guys quickly. Quickly close your eyes. Okay. Imagine you are the main character in a story. And you were having a conversation with your friends about a haunted house that's at the end of your street. And your friends are daring you to go in. First, you don't really want to do this. But then you say you don't want to look like a coward in front of your friends. So you take the step and say, okay, fine, I will show you. I will go there tonight. Okay, so your friends and you meet at a time and then they say, okay, I dare you to go in. And there you are. As you put your foot on the first step, it creaks underneath you and you hear the sound and you're worried, but you walk up slowly. And the next step is also a creaky one. You try to miss the hole in the third one and almost fall through the deck on the patio. Then you walk towards the door. You'll turn back towards your friend, facing him or her, and say, I'm going to do this. You turn back to the door and think, why am I doing this? But slowly you reach for the door, but before you can take the handle, it creaks open by itself. As you walk into the house, you can smell the moldy old existence of the house's essence, and you walk into total darkness. As you put your second footstep inside, the door closes behind you without anybody touching it, but very rapidly. And you hear from the steps to your left an old voice saying, "I am so glad that you are here." Okay, so for example, what were you feeling during that time? What was the atmosphere that was created? Were you a bit scared or a little bit nervous or anything? That is what we are aiming for. When a person reads your story, you want to have a certain feeling being created. And that is what we do through the atmosphere. Characters is the next component and actually a very important part of a story. Let's face it, a story is always about someone or a group of people. When we are creating characters, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, your character must seem real. Even if it is a story about a sock puppet, the fact that it can feel and interact makes it seem real. Remember, your reader must be able to relate to the characters. Quickly think of your favorite Marvel character. Do you have him or her in mind? Now quickly think, why do you like this character? What makes him or her your favorite? That which you like about your character is what makes them relatable to you. Now, there are a few ways that the character is presented or described to us. It can be through the actions or thoughts of the character about himself or herself, or even about a secondary character. It can be through the character's conversations with each other, or even the conversations that characters may have about one another. A character can also be described or viewed from the author's own opinion. The author can even write about the villain or bad guy of the story and have you believe that he or she is actually the hero. Everything is about perspective. It is also important to note that we have two types of characters: round characters and flat characters. The round characters are usually the well-developed characters. Throughout the story, we will see how the character grows or even changes their opinion or views on life. Many aspects of the round characters are shown. Example, the emotions, their conflicts, the way of thinking, and their likes and dislikes. A lot of the times, our round characters are complex characters, meaning we know a lot more about them than any other character in the story. The flat character is the less developed, yet still important character of the story. This type of character always remains the same. It never changes. How you meet him at the beginning of the story is the way that you will meet him at the end of the story. This means there is always a limited characterization in the flat character. They are an expression of one idea or one belief. These types of characters are often stereotyped. Do you remember what stereotyping is? Let's, for example, say there is a bartender. A bartender, the way you will meet him at the beginning, where your favorite character went for his local drinks, will be exactly the same at the end of it. And how do we view a bartender? He will always be standing behind a bar, usually with a mustache and a towel around his hand, cleaning a glass. Okay, that's usually the way we see it. Another thing about a bartender is, for example, that he always gives advice that either the main character can follow or the main character ignores. It really depends on what the type of advice is. So basically, the flat character reflects on the main or round character, meaning that they help to explain and describe more the way the main character feels, thinks, and the actions that they take. Basically, it enhances the main character himself. Now we look at presentation. This is basically how the author decides to write his story and how much of the story is revealed to the reader. We have 4 ways of presenting. The first one is the author can decide to be omniscient. In other words, to be all-knowing and all-seeing. Example, in fantasy stories, we have an all-seeing, all-knowing God looking down on his or her creation and looking at the way that this creation develops and evolves and so forth. Second, the author can be a participant in their own story. In other words, in the first person, meaning the main character tells their own story. This may cause the reader to have a limited view of the development of the story. Thirdly, the author can tell the story as an outside observer in the third person. For example, in the book Thief, or even in the movie The Book Thief, then the author decided to write it through the viewpoint of Death. Death is the one telling you about this little girl and the way that she has developed during the years. Lastly, we have the multiple storytellers. For example, in Love Actually, we have a couple of people who we meet and see and the way they develop. And at the end of the story, the whole story comes together and you see how all the characters are related in some way to each other. Either they are colleagues or they are family members or they are just friends who you did not realize at the beginning of the story. The last component we look at is the theme of a story. The theme is the total meaning of the story. What the story is actually about. Without a theme, the story lacks meaning and purpose. In all stories, we have two storytellers. We have the author, who is the living person writing the story. This is a physical, real-life person, the person whose hand you can go and shake after you read the book and liked it. And then we have the narrator. He will be the character or figure in the story who is telling you the story. It can be any character, even a pencil of a learner telling you the story about the learner and his or everyday happenings. Okay, boys and girls, this is everything, all the components that you need to know about a short story. I hope you guys memorize them and study them so that when you write your own stories, that you can keep all of these components in mind. And even when we start analyzing stories, that you can see and understand the story at a deeper sense. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Please complete the activity that is added on with this worksheet. I hope you enjoy every story that you read from now on. Have a good day.